It's so effing wide. I'm surprised you got it through that massive door. It is ridiculous.
For the size of the body, it really is, but it's actually not that much wider than the original car. It's a 1992 911 turbo, obviously, 964 turbo. This is one of the early Rauh-Welt kits, so it's not hugely wide.
Really?
It's done in 2008 in Japan at Rauh-Welt. The bodywork was. It's actually a promo deck car. It's like a big high-end tuning company in Japan.
Yeah,
really well known over there. And where Rauh-Welt might be a bit more sort of hacksawy, this was built to a really high standard. But yeah, the fronts are about 30 mil wider than the standard turbo arches that are on it.
Yeah.
And the backs are maybe about 40 mil. It's really not that much bigger because they were crazy, like very nicely shaped cars to start off with.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I fell in love with this when I first saw it come to auction in Japan, was because at first glance I couldn't tell whether anything had been done to it, and that to me is a really good sign of something that's been styled really well. Is you question whether it's still standard or not.
So were you looking for a 911, or were you looking at Japanese auctions for Japanese stuff?
I was looking for a 911 project. I had a really silly idea about doing a rotary conversion. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
A rotary engine?
Yeah, I was good. That was kind of it. I had the start to an idea in my head about doing that, and it would, it would have been pretty cool at the end. But this came up, and I immediately saw it, and I just completely fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And I actually lost it. I didn't bid in time at auction. I didn't manage to get it. And I had a friend of mine at Power Vehicles essentially chase the car down for the following 5 months, I think it was, something like that, and actually ended up finding out who bought it and the trader that it was then for sale at in Japan.
Really?
And I made the deal happen. And yeah, it had its running issues. It ended up having an engine issue that meant that I had the engine rebuilt by Fernsport in Silverstone. Promodetta engine builders, they're really good at what they do, so a lot of the components were really good, but it needed this freshen up, and it was one of those cases of, while we're here, we'll give it a bit more power. But
how powerful is this?
It's 600 wheel horsepower now.
Really?
Yeah, it is. It's quite a civilized thing to drive off boost. It has modern turbo technology and decent intercooler and stuff like that. But it's running an Haltech ECU, so modern stuff, and runs really nicely.
Yeah.
But yeah, off boost, it's relatively nice to drive, apart from the clutch, which is a little bit aggressive. But then when it comes on boost, it comes on like the old school, where it's just nothing,
Sledgehammer,
and then just an explosion of torque, basically.
This is one of several cars. Okay, Japanese. As you can tell, it's Japanese. This is a Japanese imported tuner house car, owned by Phil Morrison from Driftworks. The clutch is absolutely, by his own admission, this triple clutch is terrible and unforgiving, and I've only stalled it once. If you're wondering why I'm driving this is one of the car cave cars for Phil's car collection, and he said, yeah, you should have a drive of this, it's quite something, and that's why I'm doing it. We are not going to be driving this car hard and fast because there is nowhere to do it nearby. It's also over 640 horsepower. Yeah. So all of the power and all of the induction, as you'll hear any second now. Shitting hell. So it isn't a standard 911 turbo. It was modified in period. It's a 92 car, this is. But Phil, when he imported it from Japan, having driven it across Japan with his wife, has kind of reworked it to make it more, well, basically faster and more pliable. So it's got modern fuel injection on it. It's got a more modern Borg Warner turbo. You still get that bloody sledgehammer of power. I'm going to close the sunroof. I can work out how to. That's it. You hear the induction now, and it properly whistles, and just like a Japanese car. Phil said to me before I drove it, he said, it's weird, Johnny, it doesn't sound very flat sixy. It almost sounds more like a Nissan RB Skyline motor, and he's absolutely right. I've followed this car in another car before driving it, and it's so true. It does not sound particularly 911-y. And also the brakes are phenomenal. And I'm coming up to this junction. The brakes are actually a bit of a hybrid construction that Phil put together. And Phil being, you know, a drift car driver and a handy wheelman, he has put together a combo of brakes in this thing from a GT3, 911, 997 and a 991, I believe. What a combo, right? Right. Dual carriageway. Properly just spools up and fires you. It feels like, it almost weirdly feels like it's smoothly crabbing because it's so wide track at the back. 12J rear rims, 18-inch diameter all round. I think they're 12J at the back, and it really does. So it still feels kind of old school because you get a massive swell of power above about 3, but around town it's much more pliable. I think it's docile if you want it to be. The wastegate is behind my left ear in the back corner of the bumper. Turbo lives behind the P and the O sign in the rear reflector garnish. Electric power steering from a Vauxhall Corsa, which is pretty cool actually, I have to say. Now, I haven't driven a 964 turbo in standard form anyway for a long time, so it's hard for me to make a direct reference point. But what I can say is this thing is flipping rapid, as you'd imagine. I mean, they're not that heavy, they're not that light 964 G body turbos. This is 1480 kilos, I think, so it's not actually a light car, but with all that 640 horsepower of fire going on, it's quick, and of course it's two-wheel drive. The RWB version, this thing is basically a bad boy version of the Bad Boys 911, and unfortunately Will Smith was not available for this shoot. You've got me, Jonny Smith. Welcome to the Late Break Show. Well, I mean, that is the size of the actual engine.
Yeah, you can't really see much, can you?
No, when you look beneath it, you go, it's, if you took that off, access would be amazing.
Yeah, it is sort of made to do that. It's made so it's on Wiggins clamps and just a few bolts, so this comes out the way, and then everything is really nice and accessible. Yeah. And the recipe is kind of, the simplicity is still there, but with modernisation of new sort of drive-by-wire throttle body, 82mm Bosch, and just modern ECU. It just works really well and makes a lot of silly power, which is great.
Say, and then you got, when you put this back down, just look, whatever angle you see it at, it's bonkers. Yeah. Is this one of the biggest attention getters, like, because it's a street car?
Yeah, it does, and because it's sort of that sort of the following for classic cars now is nuts. Whereas the Lamborghini, people don't often know enough about individual Lamborghini models to recognise that as an old 2006, 2007 car. Yeah, that's a classic car, but yeah, this obviously it's kind of timeless in its shape. And the 964, again, create a lot of enemies, but it's the best one of all of them. Prefer it over a 993.
It's a very simple car.
I absolutely adore the looks of it, and particularly this one with its modifications, but without going I mean, aside from the spoiler itself, which I think is a little bit over the top.
Really?
I mean, I do have a different deck lid for this that I will be trying when I've got some time.
Will you?
Yeah, a more sort of whale tail version, but I do really like it. There's just some angles where it's a bit extreme for my old brain.
I've just realised this is a spoiler on a spoiler.
It is indeed. It is indeed. But no, the whole thing overall was built to such a high standard in Japan originally, and then we've just tried to keep with that basically, and do it justice with everything that we've done here.
Honourable build. That flutter's just amazing. And Phil, these Recaros, these like blimmin' glam rock metal flake Recaros were on the car when he bought it, but what Phil's done is he's made custom mounts for the driver's seat, because he's made it as low and inboard as he can to line up the pedals. And remember, being an older 911, it's got these floor mounted kind of organ style mounts, pedals, and I don't mind them because I'm used to driving a classic Beetle, which is where these were kind of where these are related to. I'm stuttering my words because the firepower of this thing's flicking brilliant. Right, second gear, 3,000. Do you know what? The suspension's really not just comfortable. I mean, Phil said it was so much stiffer and skittier when he got the car in Japan, but now it feels very GT3 like. It's supple, and it's obviously doing its job. It's probably soft for a track, but for the road, especially for the road in Britain, the way that it's so badly damaged and cratered these days, it's actually really bloody good. This is an immense car, I've got to say. And I've got to say a massive thank you to Adrian Flux Insurance, because I didn't think I would get insurance on this car to drive it for this video. So I haven't really prepped as much as I would normally for a drive video. I will put all of the tech spec of this car on the screen for those that want to know the nitty gritty. And of course, this car's featured on Driftworks channel before, on their YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to that in the description. One of the biggest draws to 911 ownership, be them like hot 911s like this, or just regular production line 911s, they all feel special, but they all have that high level of practicality about them, which I ruddy love. And it's cliche for somebody in my position, a motoring journalist, to really like 911s, but I think it's the fact that they're accomplished at so many different disciplines. Hear that? Do you know, the biggest surprise for me are these brakes. Phil said he took a month of his life to just work through it and have these brackets made so that he could fit these 997, 991 GT3 brakes. They're brilliant. So in a world of like resto mod 911s, this is a resto mod, partly done in period and partly done very recently, partly done in Japan, and then you could say perfected in the UK. I think the downside to driving this car today for the video is that it really has cemented my need, my yearning for an air-cooled 911 more than ever. I'd settle for a 997, frankly. I really would. See, first gear, I mean, you can be pootling at, what are we doing? 20 kilometers, and then just go. And you have to really be on your toes. It helps a lot that today is dry and hot, so we've got grip in those tyres. See, a lot of 911 people, they don't fully like the floor-mounted pedals of the earlier cars, the G-body cars. But I really like them, because it just feels like I'm getting into my 1967 Beetle, but in the words of Spinal Tap, wound up to 11. In fact, who am I trying to kid? This is so different to my Beetle. So Phil wanted to keep a level of practicality, hence why he's got the kids' seat in the back. He's actually put electric air conditioning into it. It's a sunroof car as standard, and it still has all the creature comforts inside that it would have had. So although these are Recaros which came with the car, you know, they're competition seats, and very sparkly they are too. They're comfortable. I could drive this car 2 or 3 hours today and be absolutely fine. Hello Boost. That turbo urgency is mega. It's really, really mega. Oh gosh, it's so addictive. I haven't been looking at the boost gauge because it's way down here by my right knee, and I'm too busy looking out the window because the traffic is unfortunately a bit busier than I would have liked. Maybe one day I'll get to drive this on a completely desolate mountain pass, which would just be proper trouser tent territory, I think. Hope you've enjoyed this video on the Late Break Show. It's just a little quickie of a very special car, of a quickie car. Subscribe if you haven't already. Maybe if you want to become a Patreon, I write blogs all about the cars I get to drive and where I'm going in the world. If you have already become a Patreon, thank you so much.